you all started on Tyranny. That's where we left off. So you guys should have a pretty good idea of what we read about with tyranny and what tyrants are. But what we're actually going to discuss in this little short video that I'm doing is we're going to talk about the actual what a tyrant is. Now, tyrants in the book it talked about in Greece were not just in the sense of bad men that ruled because they were powerful and they were evil. Sometimes tyrants could be good men that tried to make things better for the people of Greece. So right now I'm going to show you actually a bad tyrant, and you're going to get to see a little bit more of him in the upcoming movie Justice League. So this gentleman, oops, wrong gentleman. This gentleman right here is called Darkseid. Now, Darkseid right here, this is a HeroClix character. He is actually the leader and rules the planet of Apocalypse. Now, Apocalypse is a planet that basically is a war world. The whole idea of the war world is to conquer other worlds and basically destroy the universe. Okay? Now, in the previews for the actual Justice League movie, you see these little things flying around. Those things usually flying around look like this. They're called parademons or demons. And I'm going to get this a little bit closer so you can see what it is. This right here is what you see in the previews. They work for Darkseid. So that's where you're starting to see the actual Justice League. So their main supervillain in that movie is going to be a tyrant who's going to be trying to take over the world, or who's been trying to take over the world for many years, just couldn't do it. That's why in the preview you see them bearing that, and where Batman's trying to stop them. So of when you're actually going to have the actual timeline. Now, when we looked at the Tyranny, that's going to be located over here. You can see Tyranny is from 650 to 500 BC. So from 650 to 500 BC is when you're going to actually have your Tyranny timeline zoomed in, or actually highlighted in. Now, underneath Tyranny, the power to make political decisions is in the hands of one single man. So this is when you're looking at your sheet. You're going to have the one single man here. Now, those single men are usually called a tyrant. That's the definition of what a tyranny is ruled under, a tyrant. Now, when you get to this thought bubble, okay, this is where I want to have Mrs. Cole stop the video, okay, and then you guys are going to fill this in. So once you get it filled in, then Mrs. Cole is going to come back, and then we will discuss it. Now, here's the rule by part. Student answers will vary. Possible answers. Force. Now, force was always something that a tyrant ruled by. They ruled because they had the most power. They were the military leader. They had usually a military or an army back them up. So they always had some type of force to back them up. They never were a single man that just had people follow them because they were voted in. That's when we talk about democracy. That's when you'll see that. They promise people usually something to either change things for the right, and that's where you see where I promise people more rights and more change to help the poor. Now, they lost power. They would either rule harshly or they ignore the needs of the people. This is where you run into a lot of problems with rulers that would have good intentions but then not be able to follow through with them. And in Greece, this happened. That's why tyranny didn't last as long as other types of government, like the monarchy lasted, or democracy, which lasted for a lot longer. And that's because people liked the fact that they were able to rule themselves. Next section, what we're going to be working on is we're going to be working on the democracy of Greece. We've talked about tyranny, we've also talked about the monarchies, and we've talked about the oligarchies. The final step to Greek society, which is our most the piece de resistance, what we look at as Greece, is the stepping out into society and what we view as their most advancement into what the United States use, and which we're going to be talking about a lot next year in civics, is democracy. Now, what we're going to be using on this section is your textbook, and you're going to be taking notes on it. Now, you can either have 2-column notes, or you can do single-column notes, you can do bullet point notes, you can do any kind of notes you want for this section. But what we're going to be doing, or what I'm going to be showing you an example, is 2-column notes. It's 2-column notes, and I will show you what they look like on the paper. Doing is you'll be starting on page 260. Now 260, yes, I know, you're right there. See, here's the cat. Democracy cat. So, the power of the people. She's actually showing with her paw where it's at. you will be reading this part right here, and I will read this to you. Now, what we always know about and what we always talk about in the beginning of it is the first part of any text in this textbook, the red writing, Power of the People, is going to be an introduction about what is going on in the actual text you're going to be reading. So, most city-states adopted tyranny, but some moved towards rule by the many. The Greeks called this form of government democracy, which means rule by the people. In these new democracies, large numbers of men participated in civic life. Now, sorry, but ladies, you don't get to participate yet. It's, we're still in the 400 BC. So, no women's rights yet. So, what we're going to do is, and what we're going to be starting with, is we're going to be starting right down here in the blue, beginning of democracy. So, what we're going to be doing is I'm going to show you how the paper looks. So, I'm going to scroll down here, and this is what you're going to be looking at your paper. On the top, we're going to title it Power of the People or Democracy. Okay, and that's right here, Power of the People, Democracy. Now, I'm going to use 2-column notes, and on the left, I'm going to put beginning of democracy. Now, the reason I'm going to put beginning of democracy is because beginning of democracy is right here. So that's the first paragraph we're going to be reading. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause this video, and then I'm going to have Miss Cole have you all read the actual paragraph together, find some interesting facts, and then I will come back and you guys can review what you came up with versus what I came up with on important facts of Greek democracy. Those things that made beginning of democracy important. We're going to look at it and go, okay, now what's the first thing? 594 BC. 594 BC was the first year that democracy really started kicking off for Athens. Now, the reason that it started kicking off was because a man by the name of Solon leads the polis. Now, polis, we know, because of the last chapter we read, actually would be the same as city-state. So the city-state, or polis, was ruled by a man named Solon. Solon decided to basically reform the court systems. He made it so if a person was poor and went to court and couldn't pay their debts, they would not be sold into slavery. Now, many of you may feel that, if you have debts and you can't pay them off, being sold into slavery probably wouldn't be a bad deal because you did accrue the debts, you should have to pay it off. Well, that's a, interesting concept, but let's look at it this way. Many of you don't have to shake your heads, you don't have to raise your hands, know somebody that has had debts, either credit cards or housing or car or something along those lines, that has not been able to pay it. Do you believe in your mind that that person should be sold into slavery just because they could not pay that debt off? You don't have to answer that out loud. Just think about it for a second. In ancient Greece, they would be until Solon takes over in 594. The next thing that he does is he actually has non-aristocratic men vote for officials of the polis. This is interesting because, first of all, women don't have the right to vote. So, I know the ladies in the room, especially Elise, are probably going to be throwing a fit saying that's not right. And I got it. I understand. We're not talking, modern day society here. But look at it from the sense of only men that were wealthy or aristocratic were able to vote. After Solon, even the poor men, some of the ones that he appointed, could vote. This changed the entire concept of democracy in Greece. This allowed many more people to vote on the leaders of the Athens elite or the Athens leadership. So that is where democracy starts to really kick off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to my paper and show you what I have. So the beginnings of democracy, 594 BC, Solon leads the polis, reforms the courts, selling poor into slavery if they could not pay their debts is canceled. Non-aristocratic men, the right to vote for officials. These things right here were what were changed, or what was important in the beginning of democracy for Greece. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop, and then what I have you do is you guys are going to be working on the next section in the book, which is called Later Reforms. This is going to be in the 508 BC. Now, the man's name, we'll call him Cleisi, but it's like, I think it's called Tyrannies or something, gained the power in Athens. So that's what you're going to be reading about next and taking notes on.